2026 Early Connections Conference, Action, presented by the Van Sloan Foundation. The title of this presentation is Facilitating Increased Participation for Infants and Toddlers with Neurodevelopmental Disabilities Using the On-Time Communication.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information that we'd like to share with you. So it's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Jana Iverson. I identify as female. I am on the tall side with brown hair going gray, and I'm wearing a pink sweater and a white top and navy blue pants. I'm a professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at Boston University. I'm a developmental psychologist, and so my focus is research. And so I think this group of people is a really exciting example of how educators and clinicians and researchers can work together. So we're really excited to talk to you today about facilitating increased participation for infants and toddlers with neurodevelopmental disabilities using the on-time communication and mobility frameworks. And we want to start by asking how many therapists there are in the room. Can we see a show of hands? Okay, there are 5 or 6. Okay. How many educators? Okay.
5 or 6.
5 or 6 educators. How many caregivers or family members of a person with a disability? Okay. Okay.
Kind of hard to estimate.
Terrific. And how many people live outside Massachusetts? Oh, I do. Wait.
Just for, yeah. Oh, there.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure the presentation.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You're good.
Sorry about that. Okay. People from outside Massachusetts. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay, so there's a good number of you. Okay. All right, thank you. So this gives us a really good idea of who our audience is. And the other thing is that we want to ask you to please stay until the very end, not just because we would like to have an audience, but because there is a surprise at the end that we will be telling you about. All right. So I am going to start off by giving us a framework for thinking about the ideas that we're going to be talking about today. So on this slide, what we see is a schematic of how people traditionally think about development and delay. And the example here is language development and delay. So in this top row, what you can see is an orange circle that says joint attention. And joint attention is the ability that develops in infancy to share attention between an object and a person. So infant and caregiver might be looking at a toy together, and we call that joint attention. And then there's a square directly across from it with an arrow going towards it that says language. And so the idea here is that joint attention is a strong predictor of language development. These two skills are very closely associated with one another. In the second row, we see a circle that says joint attention delay. So when joint attention doesn't emerge on the timeline that we might expect, then in the shape across from the joint attention delay, the square, language delay. So joint attention delay is associated with language delay. And so this is traditionally how we have thought about development of these skills, so that in the delay in development, a child who's delayed in the development of joint attention, this leads them to a language delay. And so the idea is that it's characteristic of the child. But this view doesn't really reflect the nature of development. Development is much more dynamic than the static diagram might suggest to us. So first of all, it assumes that a delay is characteristic of a child. But when a child has delays in development, it impacts how other people and the environment engage with them. And second, it also assumes that developmental experiences are siloed. But we know that children are developing lots of different skills at the same time. So as children are acquiring language, they're also learning how to move their bodies and how to engage with people. And all of these things are happening together. And so development is a complex and highly interactive process that involves the whole child, caregivers, and other people in their families, and also is situated in a physical and social environment. And so the idea that I want to present to you right now is that developmental opportunities that emerge in one domain can have cascading effects on developmental opportunities in other domains. And so here, thank you, you see, on this slide, you see a photograph of a waterfall with water cascading down rocks in a beautiful forest. There are branches and trees. And so this is how we can think about development, that it's this whole cascade of events that happens and goes streaming towards the pool and then has ripple effects beyond that very top of the cascade initial flow of water. And so this has been called the developmental cascades framework. And so if we think about something as small as upright positioning has really powerful downstream effects on developmental opportunities and possibilities. So if we think about what upright positioning does beyond the motor system, so beyond the upright posture. So in this, on the first image on this slide, on the left-hand side, there's a photograph of a little girl who's positioned upright in a stander frame. She has a piano toy, interactive toy in front of her, and she's exploring it using her hands. So her hands are free to move because she's upright and to hold on to and explore toys and other objects. In the middle of the slide is a photograph of a little boy wearing a blue Bannock vest, standing in an upright, hands-free mobility device, smiling and laughing. So in this picture, what you can see is that his head orientation is ideal for inviting and initiating social interaction. How can you not engage with a child with that smile? And then finally, on the far right, there's a photograph of the same little boy wearing the same blue vest, positioned upright in a stander frame. And he's using a marker in his right hand to draw on an easel. And once again, he's smiling. And so here, what you can see is that the upright torso supports greater lung expansion. So his respiration is freed up and also supports greater alertness. Okay, so thinking about upright positioning in the context of a developmental cascade. So here I'm going to show you a figure that has one example of this cascade that's generated by upright positioning. Each new developmental opportunity is written in a circle, and each circle has a downward facing arrow to show how developmental opportunities are connected. So one thing that upright positioning does is support improved muscle and muscle strength and tolerance. So the more time children spend in an upright position, the stronger they get. And that's great because it creates more opportunities for participation in the world. So if you have greater tolerance, you can spend more time in an upright position, you'll have more opportunities to engage with people in meaningful activities. And oftentimes, this is sort of where the story gets left, that upright positioning is important because it makes you strong. But in fact, upright positioning has even more powerful effects. So first of all, thinking back to the pictures that we just talked about on the previous slide, upright positioning offers different opportunities for communication. So think about the eye contact and think about the fact that the child is more alert and has their head upright with a more panoramic view of the environment. That creates all sorts of different and new opportunities for communication. Children have greater access to the environment when they're upright. And they also have different opportunities for social interactions because of that. And so children can engage with objects differently, and they can engage with people differently in the upright position. And that provides many new and important possibilities for engaging in social ways with others. And then finally, all of these things, different opportunities for participation, more access to the environment, and more opportunities for social interactions create different opportunities for play and learning. And of course, we all know that play and learning are what young children need to do in order to learn and grow and participate in their environments. So by providing motor supports, like supporting upright positioning, we can create opportunities that support communication development. So on this slide, I'm showing you a schematic of how motor and communication development are related. So from top to bottom, there are 3 circles that are connected by arrows that are pointing in both directions. So they're bidirectional. The first circle is labeled with motor and has a line drawing of an infant shaking a rattle. But here you could also imagine a child positioned upright or a child moving about in an upright hands-free mobility device. The second circle is labeled communication and language and contains a line drawing of an infant vocalizing. The third is labeled caregiver input and environment and contains a line drawing of an infant hearing a caregiver say something as they play with toys. And there are additional bubbles and arrows that are showing other complex interactive relationships with other developmental domains. So by supporting motor skills and motor domain, we create new opportunities for change and for learning and for development in these other areas of development. All right, so just to leave you with a couple of take-home points, and I don't think I have to emphasize how important this is to all of you, but increasing participation in developmental opportunities for young children with disabilities is very important. And they don't have to be big changes. Even small changes can have a very big impact. Supporting foundational motor behaviors like upright positioning and mobility, independent mobility, has benefits that extend to other domains by providing opportunities with social engagement, play, and learning. And finally, therapists, educators, and caregivers need to consider ways to leverage the cascading effects of supports that infants and toddlers might receive in order to unleash this stream of developmental opportunities that comes about when we provide support for early motor behaviors. And now I will turn things over to Deirdre.
So hi, I'm Deirdre Galvin McLaughlin. I'm a speech and language pathologist. I'm probably average height and average build, and I'm wearing a gray dress, and I have light brown hair. So now that Jana has described how mobility opportunities can create cascading effects for communication development, Kim, Betsy, and I will share with you two frameworks that help structure holistic care for mobility and communication. So the original On-Time Mobility Framework by Andrina Sabat, who's a pediatric physical therapist, and her colleagues changed my practice as a speech and language pathologist. So I saw clear parallels between the challenges educators and therapists face when providing mobility and communication equipment to infants and toddlers with disabilities. And before, my goal as a speech and language pathologist was to provide some form of AAC equipment or support by preschool for children with disabilities. And now I think about my care practices much more holistically and strive to be on time, even though I'll admit I'm not quite there yet. And it's kind of a tall order. So on this slide, you see a schematic of the on-time framework for mobility and communication. We will describe each part of the framework and how it's depicted in the schematic throughout the rest of the presentation. We will also use two case examples to operationalize how we use the on-time mobility and communication frameworks as educators and therapists in our practice.
Hello, everyone. I'm Betsy Connolly, and I am identify as female. I have short blonde hair. I'm wearing a blue dress. I'm also a TVI in the Perkins School for the Blind Infant Toddler program, and I am also the playgroup teacher here at the Perkins Playgroup. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce you to our case study student, Megan. Megan is a delightful child. She absolutely loves spending time with her family, her mother, father, and her sisters, and she loves music. It's always been a great passion of hers. She's pictured on the screen sitting in her pink wheelchair, and she's accessing her communication device with two head switches. As I mentioned, Megan has sisters. She also has an identical twin sister. She presents with quadriplegic cerebral palsy, and she also presents with cortical cerebral visual impairment, or CVI. One of her primary modes of accessing information is auditory, and she benefits from assistive technology to support her mobility, communication, play and leisure, and to support her visual skills.
Hi, I'm Kim Sullivan. I'm a tall, blondish, grayish female, wearing black, which is typically what I wear since I'm a TVI. I'm also an occupational therapist, which is how I started my career, and I'm a TVI working in the infant and toddler program for Perkins up on the North Shore of Massachusetts. And it's my pleasure to introduce Joshua, that smiling guy. He's pictured here sitting in a blue special tomato chair, wearing his glasses and a very big smile. And he always smiles, not just in the pictures I'm showing you. He has dark hair and he's wearing a striped shirt. Joshua is a very bright little guy who loves movement, getting messy, reading books, and going on outings with his family. He has a very enthusiastic 6-year-old brother, and they have a very close relationship and enjoy doing all sorts of crazy things together. Joshua recently turned 3, sadly, for me, and has mixed cerebral palsy and a very complex visual impairment of unknown etiology. He presents with retinal scarring, where only the central part of his vision has been spared, as well as cortical vision impairment. He sees only from the top right quarter of each eye due to a lower field loss and a hemianopsia. Joshua's most efficient mode of learning is auditory, but in spite of his visual challenges, he uses his vision very well to gain information about the environment, and then also to communicate using his Tobii eye gaze system.
So on this slide, you see a schematic of the on-time frameworks. The urgency component is highlighted in yellow, and all others are grayed out. And in the urgency section is a drawing of a Bill of Rights. And so urgency component is a call for professionals to provide equitable developmental opportunities in mobility and communication. So we know communication and mobility are human rights and are protected in documents like the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And these rights are not just for adults with disabilities. These rights extend to our youngest learners, infants and toddlers, and includes ways to support independent, symbolic communication and self-initiated mobility. Oh, I think, okay. So on this slide, you see a schematic of the on-time frameworks. The timing component is highlighted in pink and all others are grayed out. In the timing component is a drawing of a baby lying on their back, propped up with a pillow. And so the timing component refers to when we should be starting to think about offering supports for communication and mobility. So in Andrina Sabit's original publication, they talk about how relative and arbitrary the concept of early is. So they give an example of how early intervention was created to provide support to children with disabilities prior to when they were traditionally identified at compulsory school age or preschool. And so therefore, when we say early, we are always talking about relative to some other standard. Whereas on time is grounded in equity, using the work of researchers who study development like Jana to pick a time frame where peers with typical development are accessing these opportunities. And based on this threshold, our target is infancy, typically around 6 to 12 months, when children start to experiment with moving and vocalizing on their own in typical development. And so at a minimum, it's our role as therapists and educators to provide timely caregiver education about the benefits of accessing developmental opportunities and normalizing whatever access support that child needs to do that.
So I will be discussing the communication timeline for our first case study student, Megan. It's a great, again, a great honor and privilege to be discussing Megan with you all today. Okay, on this slide, Megan is working on developing her visual attention skills and visually guided reach through active learning opportunities. She's laying on the rug and she's looking at and reaching for red bells, a red shiny, yellow shiny star, and a disco ball that are suspended from a PVC frame. The PVC frame was developed right here at Perkins at our Adaptive Design Center. Megan was referred to our infant toddler program at Perkins at 6 months. And Jen and Deirdre earlier talked about the importance of encouraging participation on developmental opportunities to support both motor and communication. Additionally, we're discussing about how these opportunities also discuss how Megan supported to incorporate and use her visual skills as well. Megan demonstrated early on an interest in the color red and an interest in very red, shiny Mylar materials. So we incorporate those materials into a lot of her activities and opportunities. So in this picture, she's visually orienting to the objects while reaching to explore the objects with her hands. In this slide, Megan's engaging in a developmental opportunity, again, to support her active learning skills in a sensory space that was developed from Lily Nielsen, which was called a Little Room, and we incorporated a type of Little Room here at Perkins. And she's exploring, again, the red shiny tinsel and red lights. And in this picture, she's also exploring with her twin sibling. And this is something that they would do together, which would incorporate their social, really fun social interaction together. There's also 3 darkened sides in the little room, which provides high visual contrast to support Megan's visual attention to the targets. Megan engages in active learning and multisensory exploration to support her visual, auditory, and tactile learning channels as well. She's working on visually attending to the materials and reaching out to explore the materials with both her hands and feet. So she's continuing to work on her visual motor skills as well. Additionally, she's working on her cause and effect skills, such as reaching and activating some of the materials in the little room space. In this slide, we see a photograph of Megan exploring red, shiny, and translucent materials at the light table with her one-to-one volunteer at our Perkins Playgroup. She joined the Perkins Playgroup when she was 9 months old. She's in an upright position with the support of her volunteer, and we discussed how important positioning is to support communication development. It also supports her access to use her vision and to support her visual attention skills. Again, she's using the color red and backlighting from the light to support her visual attention and her multisensory exploration. Megan also is very interested in lights and really benefited, again, from that backlighting. Oops. Okay. In this slide, we see a GIF of Megan. She's about 10 months old, and she's practicing her cause and effect skills by activating a yellow switch to turn on a lighted and musical rainbow cause and effect toy. And she's positioned in an upright seating position. We call it our Perkins chair and desk set that, again, was made by the Adaptive Design Center here. She's visually orienting to the yellow switch. The materials are presented on this black tray to support her visual attention to the switch and to her toy. And the upright position, as Jenna was talking about earlier, really supports her independent mobility and supports her visual attention to the toy. And she's able to reach out and independently activate the toy in this position as well. She's also at eye level, so we can so she could be positioned at eye level with her siblings, with her family, with clinicians, which supports her communication and social skills as well. Okay, here we see a photograph of Megan, and she's wearing a maroon dress. She's sitting with the support of her one-to-one volunteer at Perkins Playgroup. And again, she joined when she was 9 months. She's in a supportive sitting position, and she's visually attending to a piano, and she's reaching out and playing the piano. Again, music was such a interest and preference for Megan, so we incorporated it a lot throughout Playgroup as well. And so she's able to generalize these special skills, cause and effect skills of looking and reaching to play the piano. And also she's supporting her visual attention skills in the classroom setting. So she's able to incorporate some of the activities she loves at home in the playgroup setting as well. And she's, again, engaging in a very preferred activity. Okay. So in this slide, we see a GIF of Megan, and she's exploring her tactile object symbols to select a song choice with her mother. She's positioned in a tumble form chair. She visually attends the object symbol while reaching to the object symbol to select her choice. And again, she's positioned at eye level with her mom. So she had custom 3D tangible object symbols for all of her routines and for choice-making opportunities with her song choices. So we created symbols for each of her song choices because, again, music was so motivating and preferred. So pictured is her music symbol, which is bells, and some of her song choice symbols for her favorite songs, the jack-o'-lantern song, watermelon song, and the wheels in the bus song. Those are pictured on the screen to the right. Megan's object symbols are presented on a solid colored background to provide high visual contrast and to support her visual attention to the target. And then she was able to look and reach to the target to make her choice. So in this slide, we see another GIF of Megan, and she's choosing between tactile object symbols for core vocabulary words. And these were designed with Deirdre to provide tactile objects symbols for core vocabulary words. She was enrolled at the BU Infant Toddler program when she was 14 months old, working with Deirdre. And in the photograph, the lights are dimmed and the flashlight was incorporated to support her visual attention. Again, light was very motivating and really did support her attention to the target. So she's working on her cause and effect skills. In addition to her visually guided reach here, she's seated on her mother's lap and exploring the tactile symbols on her mother's lap in an upright position. And again, the flashlight illuminates the object symbols which support her visual attention to the target. And the picture on the right are two of her examples of her core vocabulary words for more, which is yellow with print and braille and a tactile symbol. And there's a red go symbol with a downward, with an arrow. And those are two examples of her tactile object symbols for her core vocabulary words. Okay. In this slide, we see another GIF of Megan sitting on her mother's lap, and she's activating a jelly bean switch. The flashlight illuminates Megan's switch to support her visual attention again, and reach to activate the switch. She's also using a switch interface on the iPad, which is pictured on the screen to the right. It's white and yellow squares, and this helps with switch-controlled games, switch-controlled gestures for playing music and simple games. And she's positioned in her mother's lap, which is upright position to support her visual attention and to activate her switch.
Okay, so I'm going to talk more about her AAC. So on this slide, we see a photograph of Megan seated in a supportive chair with a flashlight highlighting where her switches are located. They're on the left and right side of her hands. And so at 22 months, we began practicing the operational skills needed to use two-switch auditory scanning. We did this by having a field of up to 6 equally preferred choices on one page of her AAC device. One switch controlled the preview of her choices, and with each press of the button, it said the choices out loud. And when Megan heard the choice she wanted, she would hit the other switch to select the message and speak it out loud. And so we selected equally preferred choices, which is also known as errorless choice making, because that allowed Megan to practice the switch scanning pattern of using two switches without the consequence of choosing something that might be frustrating, like a non-preferred choice or stopping an activity that she was enjoying. This let her experiment with the switches and learn to choose things for communication without ever being wrong with what she selected. Okay. Oh, sorry. She's big now. We'll put her back down. Okay. Okay. Whoops. Oh, sorry, my animations. There we go. Okay, so on this side, you see a photograph of a story box for Pete the cat, the book I Love My White Shoes. A story box contains objects, in this case for fruits and materials that Pete stepped in that stained his shoes and each color shoe that was mentioned in the book. And so at 22 months, we began using tangible object symbols to introduce or reinforce vocabulary and phased out using it as her primary communication system. specifically for words that she understood really well, like the songs and the core words that Betsy and I had been working on since she was an infant. And so as Megan is a strong auditory learner, we used her hearing to give her efficient access to the most amount of messages that we could in her AAC device. And we reinforced her learning of new vocabulary concepts through other modes like touch and vision. Okay. Okay. So on this slide, we see a photograph of Megan seated in her wheelchair. Her switches that control the scanning pattern on her AAC device are positioned at her head. Her device is positioned on her tray. So by 36 months, I worked with Megan's family to trial and purchase through insurance funding a dedicated AAC device. This device had thousands of messages organized by communicative function. And so with all that errorless switch practice and choice practice, Megan could experiment with navigating to multiple pages and using it for multiple purposes. And that allowed her to kind of freely explore the organization of the robust communication system. And I will never forget her making this sentence on our last session. She said, "Something's wrong. I don't want to. It's too hard," which if folks know this language system that's scanning through a lot of different pages and words to make that sentence. And so I think this is a great example because oftentimes therapists and educators think young children communicate about tangible requests. What I find is that when children are able to access vocabulary and have complete freedom, children will surprise you with the messages that they make.
So now I'm going to go through Joshua's timeline for communication. Joshua is pictured here in green striped pajamas and is laying on a boppy pillow under a white hanging toy frame, which was made by our Adaptive Design Center. Hanging from the toy frame are a soft-sided book, a rattle toy, and a set of red plastic measuring cups that you can get at Dollar Tree, and they're everybody's favorite. Yeah. Joshua was referred to Perkins at 5 months of age after his mom was told that he had no functional vision. First day I met him, I knew that we would prove that ophthalmologist wrong. This activity is allowing Joshua to experience independent active learning, to explore cause and effect, working on focusing, tracking, shifting gaze, and also on visual motor tasks since he's reaching for the objects. Joshua's mom often updated and changed the toys on his toy frame, often with whatever the current holiday theme was, which kept him really interested in this activity. Joshua is pictured here in striped pajamas, well supported on a boppy pillow inside his little room, with his feet on a yellow and blue scallop switch attached to a power link, which allowed him to turn the lights on and off in his little room, which you can see him doing here. There are toys and other tactile objects hanging down near his hands and knees. The introduction of the little room happened around 8 months of age to encourage a little bit of independent play and exploration, cause and effect, and visual exploration. Also, incorporating the switch allowed him to practice using the switch with different body parts. We were trying to get a sense of what part of his body was the best in terms of being able to control and use a switch. Joshua's brother would sometimes join him in the little room, which allowed for communication, social connections, and maybe a little bit of fighting. Here, Joshua is well supported, sitting in his blue Perkins desk and chair with a light box with a CVI overlay in front of him while wearing his blue head-shaping helmet. This supportive seating system allows him to focus on using his vision and hands without him having to focus on keeping his body upright. So the upright and the amount of support would free him up to learn in all other ways. Using the light box allowed him to work on visual efficiency, visual tracking, visual endurance, and visual attention. We also hooked up his light box to a switch so that he could work on practicing using his switch to turn it on and off, and also worked on his arm control and accuracy. This is a picture of the last page of the Brown Bear book with 9 animals and a teacher, which I'm sure you all know very well. We began to notice around 12 months of age that Joshua started to show his strong receptive language skills by looking at specific pictures of each of the animals when named, indicating readiness for using his eye gaze to make choices. So I would say, where's the blue horse? And he was able to look at the blue horse. So even though it had, a bunch of different images on the page, he was able to do that. And that's when I told them about Deirdre. Joshua is pictured here laying on the floor in pajamas with his left hand on a scallop switch, activating a switch adapted racetrack toy on his right and a big smile on his face. Joshua received a lot of switch toys for his birthday. His mom told everyone who said, what can we get him? Combine your money and buy him some switch toys, which allowed him much more practice at using a switch. He had a lot of independent play opportunities and also allowed him to play with his brother. His switch toy encouraged vocabulary development, social interaction, and turn taking. Joshua also began using yes and no symbols that are shown here, with a smiley face inside a round yellow shape and a frowning face inside a red X. He would communicate his yes-no response by looking at the icon of choice. Also pictured here are 4 single switches in 4 different colors, which are recordable voice output buttons, which he began to use for hi and bye, more and all done, and yes and no. Joshua loved being able to talk using these switches. One more. Joshua is seen here in his Perkins desk and chair using a Jupyter desktop magnifier to reduce visual clutter and to magnify details in a colored book. This provided visual access to details in books and to trial the effect of backlighting while allowing an adult reader to help him build vocabulary and work on his visual skills.
Okay. And so on this slide, we see a GIF of Joshua looking at the screen of an AAC device. This device is controlled with eye gaze. Whenever he looks at the symbol for jump for about a half a second, the device talks, and then the clinician reinforces that choice by throwing him up and helping him jump in the air. And at 17 months, Joshua was practicing the operational skills for eye gaze. He demonstrated at his first evaluation a strong use of eye pointing, which is looking at people or objects for communication. And he also would use those yes and no symbols that Kim was practicing with him really reliably to answer questions about his positioning preferences and familiar routines. So we didn't stop there, though. On this slide, you see a photograph of Joshua seated in his high chair. He has a picture book and his eye gaze controlled AAC device in front of him. His sibling is pointing to the pictures in the book, and the words on the AAC device have to do with reading. So we quickly made progress with using the eye gaze device for communication. At 18 months, I helped Joshua's family fund an eye gaze controlled device through insurance. By 22 months, we started to set it up with topic pages for specific activities so that he could use it at home and continue to work on his operational and communication skills. Oop, I didn't zoom in. Okay. And then we didn't stop there either. Oops. There we go. Okay, sorry. On this slide, you see a photograph of Joshua's AAC device. On the screen is a grid of 15 vocabulary words or messages and tools to navigate to and from different pages. So at 28 months, we started to introduce a robust communication system that is phrase-based and organizes message by communicative purpose or situation. So Joshua could use the system to create full sentences just like this one. Joshua communicated, I think it tastes very delicious. His favorite word is very, to this day. And another example that children communicate for reasons we don't always anticipate beyond requests or asking for more. Okay, so on this slide, you see a schematic of the on-time frameworks. The frequency component is highlighted in blue, and the others are all grayed out. In the frequency component, are line drawings representing different routines from morning to night, including meal times, play, and bedtime. And so the frequency component refers to how much we should be giving access to these developmental opportunities. So we can't just use this equipment in sessions with a professional. We should strive to find solutions to increase participation in communication and mobility in all routines and settings. And this aligns really strongly with the key principles of federally sponsored early intervention, where routines are the focus of most therapeutic objectives and goals.
All your food.
All right.
You
This
forgot.
is a video of Joshua sitting in his supportive high chair. This is an example of frequency. So meal times can be a great routine to build on for frequency because they happen frequently and for short periods of time over the day, over the course of the day. Children can look for a choice, reach for a choice, or use a switch with voice output to make a choice. In this video, mom is presenting a recordable voice output switch with the message more. Joshua looks at his mother, hits the green switch to indicate more, looks at his mother again, smiles, and then opens his mouth to show that he understands that he just asked for another bite of food.
All your food. You forgot. There you go. All right, now do you want more? Go ahead. It's right here. You gotta tell me. Do you want more? Yes, you do. Okay.
Another frequency example is playtime. And playtime, especially playtime with the siblings or friends or family members in the community, can be a great routine to build on communication goals because play is so motivating and so important for learning and development, and it targets new skills that can happen several times a day. Megan's siblings would often join our music therapy sessions with myself and a music therapist, and her sibling would actually present the object symbols for Megan to select her choices. On this slide, we see a photograph of Megan. She's exploring in her little room while playing with her twin sibling. Playtime, again, it can be a great routine to build upon communication skills, and it's so motivating. It really can be really fun and interactive shared experience, and it was for Megan and her siblings. Other ideas for play in the little room could be a switch could be incorporated, as we saw with Kim's slides, to turn on the lights. You could also incorporate voice output switches within the play context to request for family members as well, or to comment. And I often worked with families to figure out times of day that families could incorporate play. With so much going on, it's important to find times that really work for families to incorporate these fun play experiences.
So on this slide, you see a schematic of the on-time frameworks. The multi-component sections highlighted in purple, all others are grayed out. In the multi-component section are line drawings representing types of communication systems, including an AAC device that has messages in English and Spanish, switches, and low-tech picture symbols. So the multi-component section of the framework refers to developing a system for mobility and communication that meets all of a child's needs. So this includes access to multiple modes of movement and communication tools and strategies. And for communication, this extends to having access to languages a child needs to engage with all people in their family and community. So we should always be striving towards a robust communication system. Robust communication systems in the AAC literature have a large quantity of words and messages on the order of hundreds and thousands. They have a variety of communicative purposes, and they are intentionally organized to support communication using evidence-based principles. They also contain features for long-term academic and communication goals. And so I know we are out of time. So what I'm going to do is I am going to skip some of the image descriptions. You've seen the images before in the communication context, and I'm just going to describe the examples of what multi-component mobility is. So for Megan, she has her Perkins chair, which we've seen before. They were working on army crawling. They're using a Riften activity chair. They have a powered wheelchair called a Permobile Explorer Mini. And they have a tumble form chair and a Perkins desk and a manual wheelchair. And I think this just shows you all the different tools that a child might need to engage in these positions. Oftentimes people have a misconception that one tool will solve everything, and that's not the case for most people who need equipment for positioning and mobility. And a stander. Okay, so for Joshua, he has a Perkins desk too. He has a stander. He has a shopping cart insert, which was made by the ADC at Perkins so that he could go on grocery trips with his single mother. He is a gait trainer. He does hippotherapy, which involves riding horses. It's important for postural support. He has swings, and he has an adaptive bumper car. And I think Joshua is a great example of a child who needs access to a lot of modes because he loves to move. And so what was really hard was trying to find ways that we could support his movement at his age, given his disability. Okay, so the sociability section, that refers to that mobility is not just moving through space or getting from A to B. It can be goal directed, like seeking out a partner for social connection. It can be playful or exploratory, like spinning in circles to experience what it's like for the first time to move your body in space on your own. Communication is likewise not just about requesting or getting basic needs met. It's how we form social connections and seek comfort, how we soothe ourselves through self-talk by saying things like, I'm going to be okay, or I'm safe, and how we resolve conflict and share ideas. Therefore, communication and mobility opportunities should be embedded in the context of social activities. And I don't think we have time for these beautiful examples, but both of these families did a really excellent job of integrating their equipment in a lot of different contexts. So the very last component is the reflection component of the framework, which refers to the process that therapists and educators should take to make intentional decisions towards an independent mobility and communication system. So it involves asking yourself, does the current tools meet all of their needs? How will they develop and grow with their current tools? And is there something that could supplement limitations in the existing tools? And how will I implement this so that others can carry it over? So we are at the last slide. So in conclusion, the on-time frameworks can provide a holistic way to structure mobility and communication opportunities for infants and toddlers with disabilities. We discussed a lot of tools, programs, and resources today. These will be available in a handout we prepared in the conference app. And thank you. And now
Thank you for attending the 2026 Early Connections Conference. Action. Scan the QR code in the center of the screen for more sessions.